Sex, violence, and disunity. These are the three sure signs of demonic evil. This is something that I only recently learned while listening to the Venerable Fulton Sheen, who is a legendary Catholic bishop who wrote a ton of books. I think over like 100 different books on various different things. But he was very, very knowledgeable about the demonic. And he gave this sermon sometime in the 1960s. And I listened to this sermon recently, and it just hit me so clearly that the sex, violence, and disunity, that truly underpins all of the real evil of this world. And in his sermon, he actually goes into more detail as to why those are the signs. But and I'll never be able to deliver something as profound as Fulton Sheen, but I understand and will from a stupid layperson's perspective give you my understanding and my I guess recapture and deliver to you on these things, because he gave this sermon in the 1960s, and he was giving examples and referencing the time. It is 2025, and the things that he was saying in that sermon not only apply today, but even more so. You see, in the 1960s, he was front and center of and saw the sexual revolution and its impact. And a lot of the things he addressed and wrote about and said addressed those times, the hippie movement, the sexual revolution, and all that stuff. And when I look at the world today, and I look at the landscape of evil, and I look at the sexual problems that we're having in today's society, and I look at the violence of today, and I look at the disunity of today, and it's so much worse than it was back then. It's so much more prevalent, and it's so much more in our face, and it's so much more obvious. And what's funny is that it's not funny, but interesting that in his sermon, he references a psychiatrist from the Rockefeller Institute at that time who did studies and showed that what underpins a lot of people who suffer from serious mental health issues are folks who have a distortion or a love for things like nudity. They struggle with, violence and rage, and or they have a sort of multiple personality or a divided personality. And he called this out in his sermon. Fulton Sheen called this out in his sermon as a way to say, hey, did you never think about looking at these three things you found in your psychological or psychiatric studies? Did you ever think not to look at how this might relate to the same demonic possessions that the church has dealt with over the years? And he even gave the example of the man that was healed by Jesus in Mark, I think it was Mark 5, where Jesus addressed the man who was among the tombs, who was naked, and he was so sexuality, nakedness, like there's some sort of distortion there. So he was naked, he was violent, they couldn't even chain him down, so he was so strong and he was so violent, he would break away from chains. And when Jesus addressed this possessed man, he said, "What is your name?" And this man's reply was, "We are Legion." Creepy, crazy. Legion. And from my understanding of what Fulton Sheen said in this sermon is, at that time, a legion was 6,000 Roman soldiers. So the three things in that possession showed clear: nakedness, some sort of sexual issue, violence, they couldn't chain him down, and then his personality, his identity was ripped and torn apart. And so, and that is actually what the word diabolical means. It means to tear apart. It means to divide. It means to cause a disunity. And it got me thinking as I listening to the sermon, and I'm thinking about what Fulton Sheen is saying, and it just hits me just like very clearly that if you look at the world today, and if you look at the spiritual war that we're in, and again, going back to some of the other, one of my, the first video I made about warfare and the deceptive nature of Satan, we are in an ongoing war. And what you have to understand about warfare is that it's what's central in warfare is deception, right? So it is all about two opposing wills trying to gain an advantage over one another, primarily through deception. And so Satan and the times have changed, meaning that Satan has adapted to the times. He has changed his strategy to deceive us. He has shifted away from his tactics, meaning that in the 1960s, it was the sexual revolution. It was the violence of those times. It was a different kind of disunity. You think of the Vietnam War, you think about some of the societal changes at the times, the hippie movement versus, kind of sort of the nuclear family, right? It was sort of like this opposition against that. Well, now all these many years later, you look at society today, and we have this insane epidemic of like sexual disorientation. You have things like OnlyFans, you have things like social media, you have things like but just pornography, like all over the place. Like it used to be sort of a shameful thing, the magazine, or you went to a dirty side or whatever, and people kind of kept it hidden. It's not even hidden anymore. You just go in a social media app, you just open something, and it's like right there. It's absolutely mind-blowing. So this sexual perversion from the diabolical, it is now more accessible, it's more prevalent, it's more present than it ever has been. The violence. I mean, just look at, it is, what's today, June 9th or whatever it is. Just look at the riots going on in LA right now. Look at the violence over the years with some of these riots and the social and civil unrest, and look at the wars that we've had. I mean, it's so violent, and worst of all, look at abortion. That is violent. It is a horrific act, and it is a subtle violence that seems to have been normalized by our society. Disunity. Look at the amount of marriages that are failing. Divorces are at an all-time high. Close to 50% of first-time marriages end in divorce. And then the numbers jump exponentially after that for second and third-time marriages. It's absolutely insane. We have a loneliness epidemic, especially amongst men, where relationships aren't forming, both romantic and good brotherly relationships, camaraderie. Like, it's not happening. It's it is very clear that we are more separated. We are more torn apart than we've ever been. So when people think that this is all just a social problem, that this is all just a people problem, when people don't acknowledge the true and deliberate acts of evil from Satan and his legion, it is mind-blowing to me, because it is so obvious. He has taken a different strategy. He is leveraging true tactics, like true warfare, to get an upper hand. And we're still over here playing checkers. And Fulton Sheen in this sermon said there are three things we can do to absolutely protect ourselves and deter the demonic. The name of Jesus, the blood of Christ, and committing ourselves to the Blessed Mother. And Fulton Sheen was absolutely spot on about the nature of the demonic. Absolutely spot on about the nature of evil. And he is absolutely correct and spot on about the answer, about the solution here. We must cling to our faith. We must trust in Jesus Christ. We must receive the sacraments. We must receive the Eucharist. And we must consecrate ourselves to the Blessed Mother and trust in her. So, don't let your guard down.